The Duke of Wellington class would be the last British first-rate ships of the line designed as sailing-only vessels, and their history reflects the radical changes that were happening in the middle of the 19th century. Originally, they were supposed to be a modification of the 110-gun Queen class, itself a derivative of the Caledonias, which were themselves based off of HMS Victory. They were supposed to be 120 or 121-gun sail-powered vessels, but between the time of their being ordered in the early 1840s and being laid down at the other end of the decade, they were slightly modified, but still basically fit that overall design spec. But meanwhile, the Royal Navy had slowly been adopting steam propulsion in their smaller ships. First, paddle wheels were installed on ships not intended for the line of battle, and then screw propellers had been fitted on older ships turned into guard ships, as well as sloops and frigates. But then, in 1848, the French began work on the purpose-designed screw-driven ship of the line, the Napoleon. Whilst similar British ships were being developed, the Admiralty also threw itself into a wholesale conversion programme, and the 4-ship class, which were by this point partially built, were slated for conversion to auxiliary steam power. The 4 ships were already on the stocks: Windsor Castle, Marlborough, Prince of Wales, and Royal Sovereign. Of these, Windsor Castle and Royal Sovereign would be modified first, consisting of being cut up into 3 sections and additional frames inserted to accommodate the engines and dress their lines a bit. This additional length also afforded them a few more gun ports, and so they became 131-gun ships. Marlborough and Prince of Wales would also become 131-gun ships, but to an altered design that cut them into 4, the inserted sections being the larger block for the engines, and a small insertion fore and aft for better lines, as compared to the other 2. Thanks to the rushed and uncertain nature of the work, all 4 ships received different engines of different power levels, ranging from just under 2,000 indicated horsepower on Duke of Wellington to over 3,300 indicated horsepower on Prince of Wales, which left their speeds under steam ranging from 10.5 to 12.5 knots depending on the ship in question, although all the ships were also noted to be very good under sail alone. Displacement, as completed, hovered at around 6,000 tons, with armament consisting of a mixture of 8-inch shell guns and 32-pounder cannon of varying lengths and weights, depending on which gun deck they were on, something which had been adopted earlier into the Royal Navy from an American practice of the 1820s. The shell gun's nominal projectile weight was around 50 pounds, and there was usually also a single 68-pounder included as bow chaser. Being wooden ships of the line, there was of course no armour. On the day of the launch of the Windsor Castle, 14th of September 1852, the Duke of Wellington died, and she was subsequently renamed in his honour. But whilst all of these ships would have surprisingly long careers, their active service lives were actually quite short. The Duke of Wellington became the flagship of the British fleet that took part in the Baltic campaign of the Crimean War, but went into reserve immediately afterwards in 1856, becoming a guard ship in 1860 and then finally a receiving ship at Portsmouth. That's a vessel used to house new sailors prior to their assignment to an active warship, and also to house sailors in transit between a ship that's just paid off and another one that's just coming online. Here she remained until the 20th century, with no less than HMS Victory assigned as her support ship, until she was eventually sold for breaking up in 1904, less than a year before the keel of HMS Dreadnought was to be laid down. Marlborough only entered service after Duke of Wellington had left active service, serving in the Mediterranean Fleet during the 1860s before becoming a training ship in Portsmouth, not far from the Duke of Wellington, in the 1870s, then sharing her fate as a receiving ship. But in 1904 she was in somewhat better shape and would be moved further up the harbour to become an accommodation ship for HMS Vernon, the name for the Royal Navy's torpedo training school, where she would serve until 1923, when she too was sold for breaking up, although she sank whilst under tow to the breakers. Prince of Wales, meanwhile, came into service at almost the same moment that the ironclad HMS Warrior did, and her active service life spanned only 7 years, ending with the removal of her engines so they could be installed into another wooden-hulled vessel that was undergoing conversion into an ironclad. She therefore took over the role of HMS Britannia, the Dartmouth-based training ship, from the original vessel of that name, and here she would remain until 1905, when the school was moved ashore and she was sold for breaking up in the middle of the First World War. Royal Sovereign would have the shortest but most interestingly different life. Although launched in 1857, she went straight into the reserves until she was picked out for conversion into an ironclad in 1862, whereupon she was radically cut down and turned into a 4-turret coastal defence ship, with her remaining hull protected by slabs of iron up to 5.5 inches thick. But even this radical conversion didn't give her that much time on active duty. She also left the fleet in 1867 to become a training ship for the gunnery school HMS Excellent, a job that she did for 6 years, after which she was placed in deep reserve until she was eventually sold and scrapped in 1885.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.